Coming up today, radioactive seeds implanted inside the body. We explore why brachytherapy is best for certain cancer patients. Good morning. It is Tuesday, March 28th. I'm Jessica Lovell. Welcome to the Morning Medical Update. High doses of radiation can kill cancer, but damage your body at the same time. Today, we learn about a technique that allows for more precision, which means fewer side effects, fewer complications, and fewer trips to the hospital. It's called brachytherapy, and it involves placing tiny radioactive seeds or pellets inside the body. Today, we are joined by Dr. Ronald Chen. He is Clinical Service Chief of Radiation Oncology here at the University of Kansas Health System. He is also Associate Director of Health Equity at the University of Kansas Cancer Center, and he runs his own research lab at KU Med Center. Good morning.
Hey.
It always takes a while to get through all of your titles, Dr.
I apologize.
Chen. That's okay. That's okay. That's why we have you here. Also joining us remotely is one of Dr. Chen's patients, Bob Berkebile. He had brachytherapy to treat his prostate cancer. He also happens to be a globally respected architect. And if you've heard of the Kansas City firm BNIM, the B is for Berkebile. So we're so glad to have him today. But Dr. Chen, I want to start with you today. Let's talk about the procedure itself. And we're going to start by comparing it. We want to show some video of a more common external radiation where a patient lies on a table, then a machine shoots a radioactive beam at the cancer. But Bob actually did get some of his treatment, of this type of treatment, on top of the brachytherapy. But Dr. Chen, why not stick to just external radiation to treat patients like Bob?
I think there's a couple of really important aspects of brachytherapy, and for patients like Bob and other patients. I think one aspect of giving radiation is we want to give the highest amount of radiation to where the cancer is and minimize the radiation to other organs outside of that tumor. And actually, the best way to do that is by putting the radiation directly into the tumor, like brachytherapy. And there's no external machine that can do as much as we can with brachytherapy. So prostate is very easily reachable. I can put radiation seed directly into the prostate. It treats where the cancer is. There's minimal radiation dose outside because I'm putting the seed directly into the prostate. And that really, for many patients, is the best way to treat the cancer as hard as we can and really spare all the other organs in the body from radiation.
So let's see it if we can. We have some video of brachytherapy. This was a procedure with a different patient that you did. You put the patient's legs up in a stirrup. You're using ultrasound. What are you using the ultrasound for? How does that help?
The brachytherapy really is a procedure that takes a lot of precision. We need to make sure that we're seeing the prostate very clearly, and I am putting seeds very precisely in different locations throughout the prostate. And using the ultrasound, and a very sophisticated ultrasound, allows us to see the prostate as accurate as possible so I can put the seeds where they need to go. So
I hear you using terms like precision, tissue sparing, beneficial for cancers like prostate. It sounds a whole lot like proton therapy. Yeah. So how is it different? How is it the same? Well,
I think that it's the same idea. The overall idea for cancer treatment is to treat the tumor and spare the organs around it as much as we can. Proton therapy is one great way to do that. And what I really tell patients, and I think for different patients, there's different options that we need to talk to them about. It depends on how aggressive the cancer is and where in the body we need to treat. But for an organ like the prostate, actually proton therapy still is an external machine that the beam needs to enter the body somewhere, and there's a path until it gets to the prostate. And so there's still a little bit of radiation that's outside the prostate, even with proton therapy. And with seeds, for patients that's suitable for that, I can put the seeds, again, directly in the prostate, and that actually spares tissue even a little bit better than proton therapy does.
So what's it like once you put those seeds in? This is not open surgery, so what is it like in that moment? Instead of cutting them open, you're putting them right in there.
Well, what I tell patients is that brachytherapy for prostate cancer is very similar to a prostate biopsy. Every patient has gone through a biopsy to diagnose the cancer, and brachytherapy is kind of a similar procedure. It is not surgery at all. There's no cutting. I don't sew the patient. It's not surgery. And the entire procedure, I use needles, and I use needles to help me put seeds in the prostate. And what I usually tell patients that the entire procedure takes about, on average, about 15 needles. So about 15 needles into the prostate. And for many prostate biopsies, just to diagnose the cancer, biopsies take 12, 15, 18 needles. And in that sense, brachytherapy is actually kind of similar to just a biopsy.
So I think we're showing the seeds getting delivered. And when I hear seeds, I think of seeds. My planting, Dr. Chen, I plant things and they don't grow, but you plant them like you plant them in the ground. What are these little seeds like? Explain those to me.
The seeds are very, very small. And what you saw in the video is cartridges, and you'll see it again. You'll see cartridges, and each cartridge contains about, right there, about 15 tiny little seeds. They're probably the size of a grain of rice, but maybe half the thickness. And I actually think the thickness is a little bit like mechanical pencil lead for people who used to use mechanical pencils. And it kind of looks like the lead, but very short. So very, very little seeds that deliver radiation that we're able to put inside the prostate.
And so you up the amount of seeds based on how much, because I want to know how much radioactivity is in each of these seeds. Are they all created equal? Or do you add more?
We use pretty standard seeds, but what often patients ask me is, well, how many seeds are you going to use? And that differs by how big the patient's prostate is. As people can imagine, if the prostate is pretty small, I don't have to use very many seeds to be able to adequately treat the entire prostate. If the prostate is bigger, I have to use more seeds. And so we calculate the number of seeds we put in based on each patient's prostate and the cancer. But even though the number of seeds may vary, the number of needles is still about 15 for every case. And so in that sense, it's still a pretty minimally invasive procedure. So needles can contain 1 seed, 2 seeds, 3 seeds based on how big the prostate is. So about 15 needles. The number of seeds varies based on the prostate size.
And are they under full anesthesia?
Yes. I guess one of the better things about this procedure than the biopsy, which I was comparing it to, is that we do put patients under anesthesia, full anesthesia. So really what I tell patients is you take a nap, and when you wake up, we'll be completely through. And so patients will not feel the needles go in. They won't feel anything at all. And so it's try to minimize the discomfort from the procedure.
So after the procedure is over, are the patients themselves radioactive?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
That's a very common question. The patients are a little bit radioactive because there is radioactive seeds that we put into the prostate. And we give patients very specific instructions about that. And Bob can comment on his experience there. But really, even though patients are a little bit radioactive, what I usually tell patients is they do go home the same day. This is an outpatient procedure. They're not staying in the hospital. And really, if we felt that they were unsafe to the public because of radioactivity, we wouldn't send them to the public. And so, yes, they're a little radioactive. There's some precautions we tell them to follow, but really it's not as big of a deal as some patients may think.
So why was Bob such a good candidate for brachytherapy?
Yeah, one of the really important aspects of brachytherapy that I mentioned is that it's really the best way to put radiation where the tumor is and the best way to really spare the other organs from radiation. The other really important aspect of brachytherapy is that actually for many patients, this is a type of radiation that will give us the best chance for cure for prostate cancer. So for example, there's been clinical trials that have compared, for patients with, say, high-risk prostate cancer, that there's a clinical trial that compared just getting the external radiation, which is what most patients get in the community, versus getting radiation plus the brachytherapy procedure. And the cure rate was very different. For high-risk prostate cancer, the cure rate from just radiation, the external radiation with the machine, on that trial was about 55% at 10 years. And so at 10 years, almost half the patients will have a recurrence just with external radiation. And when you add brachytherapy, the seeds on top of radiation, because it's so focused, it kills the tumor directly, that cure rate goes from 55 to 80% cure rate at 10 years. That's a huge difference. And so we offer a lot of patients like Bob brachytherapy to really maximize their cure rate with the best treatment available.
And I asked you why I hadn't heard of it, and you said it's been around quite a while, but not everybody offers it.
Yeah. Well, just like any other procedure, only very specialized places and specialized physicians are trained to do this procedure. Here at KU, we offer this. We actually have 4 physicians in my department now that do prostate brachytherapy. And I think around the country, really, I think some of the best cancer centers offer brachytherapy. Harvard, UCLA, Cleveland Clinic, MD Anderson are some of the places that offer brachytherapy, but it's not available at most other hospitals. And so many patients don't hear about this option, even though it's the most precise for prostate cancer, and for many patients offers the highest cure rate.
And that's a good time to bring in Bob this morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great.
So, Bob, first of all, just thanks for being with us and wanting to share your story. Tell us when you found out you had prostate cancer.
About 2.5 years ago.
And what was that like for you, hearing that?
Well, it was shocking because my urologist had told me 3 years prior that I wouldn't need to have annual physicals with him any longer. And we had developed quite a relationship by then. And he said, we can get together for coffee, but you won't need my exams. And 3 years later at my annual physical, my doctor said, Bob, I think you should call your urologist. And I started to tell her this story, and she said, I remember, but call him anyway. And so when I did, he, of course, then examined me and gave me some additional tests, and ultimately told me I had a very aggressive cancer. And he and his colleagues were preparing to treat it, but it took several months for me to meet the other colleagues, to have all the exams and tests that they wanted before they started the therapy. And during that time, I grew anxious and did my own research. And of course, I discovered brachytherapy and Dr. Chen. And when I began looking at the efficacy of these different protocols, I found this had a much higher rate of success. And so then the challenge was just getting to meet Dr. Chen and setting up the process. But that was my experience. And I would have to say, Dr. Chen, I've always so appreciated your attitude. And if you recall, I was unclear about some of the, if you will, three-dimensional aspects of this treatment. And I asked you about it, and you borrowed my pen and drew on the paper on the examination table. And I took that drawing with me. And frankly, that attitude and occasionally giving me a high five in the corridor was a huge part of my experience. And I think part of it increased my capacity to heal and get well and move on, which I came to love the KU team, and I've recommended a number of friends to this system and this treatment since, and they have a similar reaction.
Well, so glad you went in search of that second opinion, something we talk about.
Yeah.
Sometimes we send people for second opinions, and sometimes we are the second opinion. Yeah. And we're just glad that you dug in and did your own research. Are you cancer-free today, Bob?
All the reports suggest that I am. I feel great, and I'm thankful for this experience and for my health today.
So tell us, for those who may end up in the hands of Dr. Chen in the future, what was this procedure like? Just what instructions were you given afterwards? What was that recovery time like?
Yeah. Well, of course, because of the research, I knew a lot about it before we got to surgery. And in my case, my curiosity at that time was a shield that he was also inserting during that surgery. But for me, first of all, it was outpatient procedure, and I entered the OR still awake. I wasn't the drugs hadn't quite taken effect, so I was able to talk to him even in OR. And shortly thereafter, I was recovering, and my wife was there to take me home. So it was a insignificant event, really, the brachy procedure.
Maybe I can talk about the shield that he was mentioning.
Yeah, we love insignificant events. That is a really good way of describing it. Tell us about the shields.
Yeah, so Bob was mentioning a shield, and I think that's something that also has been created in the last several years. One of the things that radiation can cause for prostate cancer is irritation of the rectum, because the prostate and rectum are right next to each other. One of the things that we do now very commonly for our patients here is that we put a shield or a gel to push the rectum further away from the prostate as a way to really minimize radiation to the rectum. And that's really worked very well to help us minimize side effects even further.
So will Bob have any more follow-ups with you?
Yes. So Bob continues to have follow-up with us. If I can share this, Bob is almost 2 years out of treatment and doing very well. And at this time point, we see Bob about every 6 months for continued follow-up.
So will you be a part of his life for forever and ever? Will he continue to see you?
Well, what we usually tell patients is that for prostate cancer, we usually follow patients for 10 years. And really, I think if we make it through the first 5 years and then through 10 years, and if we do well, then we really feel safe that the patient has been, if I can use the word, cured. And so we'll follow Bob for 10 years, and I anticipate that he will do very well.
So, Bob, we mentioned off the top of the program that you're an architect. Tell us what buildings that you've worked on that we might recognize.
Well, first of all, I am an architect, and my firm is B&IM, and when I say my projects, of course, I have a lot of colleagues who do the work, so I want to be clear about that. But we've been blessed to have a lot of highly visible buildings in the community. My first fairly famous design was the airport terminals that are now being removed from the site, thanks to our new terminal being created. But the ones in town that everyone uses and enjoys all the time include the Kaufman Performing Arts Center, the block addition to the Nelson Atkins, the Union Station, and Science City. And one of the ones I get a lot of feedback about is Plexpod Westport Commons, the conversion of the old Westport Middle School on 39th Street to a community space and a co-working environment. And we are now under construction on the high school across the street to bring more housing and more services, including an early learning center, to the Westport community as well.
Well, you and your entire team have your stamp all over the city. I just have to go back for a moment. Bigger, better, newer always seems great when it comes to this new airport. People are visually really liking it, but you certainly cannot replace memories. And I think we all have these memories of the now old airport, as we're calling it. What has it been like for you just to have this front and center over the last couple of years as a city coming together and talking about this new space?
Well, I think it's great to see the community evolve and all the exciting things that are happening, and the airport's part of that. The airport I designed could not accommodate the level of security we need today. It did, but it was very inefficient and awkward and made it a terrible visitor experience. The new one does that well, and it's a high-performing airport environmentally. And they're converting now the fleet to an electric fleet, solar-powered. And so we're moving into the future brilliantly, and we're inviting visitors to the city to have a good experience at our airport, and great local foods and great artwork everywhere in the new terminal. So I'm excited about the new experience.
Yeah, spoken like a true architect and builder of new things. So we appreciate you helping to advance our city. Beautiful, beautiful things to see. Let's check in with Dr. Hawkinson. If you have any questions for Bob or Dr. Chen, you can send them to YouTube, Facebook, and the Medical News Network. There are the links right on your screen. But let's get that COVID count with our Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control, Doc Hawk. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. So neat listening to that. For sure.
I know, right? I know. It's kind of hard. I'm kind of a creature of habit, so I kind of like the old one.
Yeah. Well, right now we have 44 total cases in the hospital. Of those, 29 are active, so kind of a little bit bump up, 5 in the ICU and 1 on the ventilator.
Okay, so we know you keep tabs on all sorts of infectious diseases. You were doing this way before COVID came along. The World Health Organization is tracking cholera outbreaks in 24 different countries. Now, the only outbreaks near us are in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, but a lot of these outbreaks look like they're getting worse. The WHO labels the global risk is very high. What does that really mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is very important, and you're right. You know, even before COVID, here at the health system, we were getting ready and we were preparing for these emerging and re-emerging infections, and we continue to do that today. Obviously, one of the biggest issues prior to COVID was the Ebola, but now we have other emerging or re-emerging infections as well. I think it is really substantial, and what makes it substantial is the fact that you can really get on an airplane and in a few hours be in a total different part of the world. And obviously, if you don't go to a place or a healthcare facility where they are ready for that and taking the precautions, it can easily spread. Obviously, if you're out in public, it is very easy to spread these diseases. But this is why Dr. Stites and I continue to talk about those pillars of infection prevention go with you everywhere, and they will help reduce your risk of getting these things. The most important one is washing hands and hand hygiene. It is vitally important to continue to do that. That is one of the ways that this disease, cholera, spread. But I think it is a big issue because it is fairly simple in treating these patients, but they can have very severe outcomes if not treated correctly. The biggest thing you want to do for these patients with that disease is continue to replenish and hydrate them as much as possible. So it is a very real risk. It is something also that we are preparing for, not just this disease, but any. And the Haiti situation is so unfortunate. You know, they initially had their outbreak after the hurricane. I think that the outbreak was started by some of the aid workers that came in. They had, I don't remember, 100,000 cases or so, but I could be wrong on that number. But it seemed to die down, and now, unfortunately, they are seeing a resurgence in those cases and have been since, I believe, about December or so. But it is a very real threat, and it is something that we are continuing to watch for at our health system, but also in the community so that we can appropriately isolate, contain that, and, of course, treat those patients.
80 reporters with us today. Let's get to our community questions. First one's from Sarah. Dr. Chen, what else does brachytherapy help with?
Yeah. Again, brachytherapy is a type of radiation that where we put the radiation or the seeds directly into a cancer that we can reach. So prostate is one example, but another very common example would be gynecologic cancer, cervical cancer, endometrial cancer. There have been lots of clinical trials to show that some form of brachytherapy in cervical and endometrial cancer, again, treats a tumor directly and really helps us maximize the cure rate. So that's another procedure that we do very commonly here at KU in our department.
Breast cancer?
There is some form of breast cancer, a brachytherapy as well, and it's a way to treat where the tumor is and not treat the entire breast. And we do offer some breast brachytherapy also here.
That's what's so interesting about these therapies. They're so narrow in their focus,
Yep.
and the more of those we get, they're better instead of one big blanketed type of therapy for all.
Right, and you know, not to sort of make any broad recommendations here, but I think it's really important when somebody has cancer to get a second opinion and go to a place that has all the different options available so we can meet the right patient, the right diagnosis with the right kind of treatment for them.
Well, we're going to get today's takeaway, and I just want to tell Bob, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your story. We're so glad that you found us and went searching for that second opinion. Just your final takeaway today.
Well, in my case, I can just say I was on a troubled hunt, and I am so delighted that I found Dr. Chen and KU, and I think having a team that feels like a team and is enthusiastic about your health and the quality of life that you're living is an important part of therapy.
Yeah, those high fives from Dr. Chen in the hallway, they go a long way. They really send that message. Dr. Chen, your takeaway today.
Well, I think one of the great things about cancer treatment is that there continues to be advances and it keeps getting better all the time. Brachytherapy has actually been around for several decades. It's an old treatment and has a long track record of working. But the technology of how accurately we can now do brachytherapy with the imaging that we have, with the way that we can place the seeds exactly where they need to go, that has really improved quite a bit. So we're now able to continue to work on curing cancer and minimizing side effects. And the technology improvement in brachytherapy continues to help our patients.
All right, keep coming back with those success stories, Dr. Chen. Always appreciate you. Final takeaway today, Dr. Hawkinson.
Yeah, again, I think Awesome story, and just good to hear those thoughts of our guests for sure. Just want to reemphasize, I think our headline today was really good. Just in general, again, to continue to support, endorse those pillars of public health. Vitally important to maintain good hand hygiene. Please, when you're out in public, after the gym, after church, after going to the store, remember you can still use the alcohol gel, but also appropriate hand hygiene with soap and water is vitally important. It will help reduce your chance of getting these diseases, which we are seeing more and more, as you said, Jessica, continuing to spread and seeing stories about them.
Doc Hawk, so true. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of our guests and, of course, our viewers for being with us day to day. Ahead of the Royals home opener this Thursday, Dr. Vincent Key has been giving us baseball advice for all ages. You can see more on the KU Sports Medicine Twitter page. Here's today's tip of the day.
This is Dr. Vincent Key, head team physician for the Kansas City Royals, with your tip of the day. The tip of the day is, what are 3 things that infielders can do? The first is a proper warm-up. The second is a cool down. And then the third is doing a little bit of arm care. You need to properly warm up, meaning get there in plenty of time to be able to get your stretches in. It's not 1 stretch, 2 stretches, and go and play. So I usually recommend 20-25 minutes before the event, you should get there and properly warm up. The second is a proper cool down. That involves getting the lactic acid out of your quads. You can do some light jogging. You should do some light stretching. Also making sure after the event that you're hydrating. The third and the most important part is to do a little bit of shoulder and lower body work in terms of making sure that your soft tissue is strong and your soft tissue is supple to be able to do the event. We need to be able to do those things to decrease the risk of inflammation and ultimately to decrease the risk of injury. And that is your tip of the day.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and open mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now everywhere podcasts are available.